Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's Town Centre Management Committee. May I start with a quick reminder. This meeting is being recorded and streamed on the internet, so by attending this meeting, you're deemed to have consented to that. Can I start with the first item on the agenda? Any apologies for absence, please? No apologies received. Thank you. Any declarations of interest in tonight's agenda? Councillor Strong.
Item 2B, 9B, non-pecuniary.
Thank you. Any others? Okay. Item number 3 then, Chairman's announcements. So just very briefly, I would like to thank all of the staff who helped to organise the Remembrance Day activities on Sunday, which I think were very successful, and also all of the volunteers that helped to make it possible, and of course everyone who attended. So moving on to number 4, which is public open session. Do we have any members of the public in attendance? There's no one physically in the chamber, and I can't see anybody online. So I'm assuming that's a no. So that takes me to members' questions, which I think is this is the first time we've had members' questions at this committee. Over to, I've forgotten your name, how awkward. Councillor Pullinger.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Knight. I have 2, if that's okay. Do you want me to just take them one at once?
Let's take them one at a time.
Yeah, okay. So the first one is around pigeons. So the matter of the pigeon infestation in the town centre was first raised at council in April. And in September, council resolved to erect 4 do not feed signs to allow enforcement and also to implement pest control measures, including the use of humane lethal methods. The signs have now been erected, so I was wondering if could we please have an update on whether any enforcement has been carried out and whether a pest control company has now been contracted. And also, are there any plans for increased cleaning around the town centre, because there's quite a problem with droppings in various places on some of the benches and particularly around the public toilet areas.
Thanks. So on pigeons, we have been in contact with CBC antisocial behaviour team, asking them to step in and do some enforcement, if you like, activity around the pigeons, and we are still unfortunately considering the situation regarding the other measures that we were working on. So we're still working on those measures.
Can I mention something?
Please.
Okay. So Jonathan and I have spoken before about the fact that some of our benches aren't perfectly situated. The one which is by the side of our notice board in particular is badly situated. So I know that Jonathan's public realm team will make sure that they are fastidious in making sure that that's as clean as possible. Yeah. But it is an ongoing problem until we manage to find a permanent solution.
Thank you. Any? Please.
Well, isn't it just a question really on that subject? Is it not possible to move the benches to a different place where they're not going to get covered in it?
Councillor Russell.
I wouldn't be very keen on that until we've decided what we want the layout of the market square to be, because we could be moving them and moving them again. And we know we've got a problem with the trees, and although it won't be a popular move at some point, that some of those trees are going to have to come out and be replaced with the right trees that are planted in the right way.
Councillor Strong.
I'm just concerned. I thought we decided that action would be taken to eradicate pigeons, and that doesn't seem to have happened yet. I thought that was fairly clear from previous instructions, and I'm disappointed that that hasn't taken place. I think the benches is a side issue in comparison.
Okay, thank you. I guess that's duly noted. Certainly the problem does seem to be getting worse. If I may just make an observation from the chair, I haven't witnessed anybody feeding the pigeons recently, but they do seem to be very good at just picking up scraps that people leave accidentally. And there's an awful lot of them on the roof above seasons these days. Anything else on members' questions?
So yeah,
of course, you had a second one, didn't you, Councillor?
So I also understand that the Kingsreach developers have refused permission to erect the Christmas tree in the central square. So please, could you advise us of the reasons and give us an update on what the backup plan is for that tree.
Yeah, no, I'll go. Thank you. Yeah. So on the Christmas tree, yes, essentially we found out yesterday, they informed us, the managing agents for the developers, that they were not happy with us to erect a tree as we had proposed in the King's Reach main square area. The reason they gave for that is essentially they would have had to carry the insurance. It was not covered in the terms of their own insurance policy cover. So they turned us down. In terms of other measures, or other locations, if you like, we have explored the Saxon Leisure Centre and have been granted permission to put a tree up there in their main kind of area where the entrance is essentially to the main centre. So that's a possibility as well.
Councillor Bullinger, do you want to come back?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it would be very disappointing if it's not anywhere on King's Reach. I know previously there'd been some thoughts about potentially being outside the Orchard Centre. I know that there is a lot of people in King's Reach, particularly people who've been told by the coffee shop who were planning to sell the stars, for example, that there was going to be a Christmas tree in King's Reach. I think there'll be a lot of disappointment if there isn't one there. So if we can try and have one in that location, it would be preferable.
Yeah, so I just want to be clear, there's no absolute determination yet, because obviously we want to consult members anyway. There's some options on the table. And I would agree with Councillor Pullinger. We're striving to make that happen, and we're looking at alternative options, aren't we, Karim? Either an external tree at the Orchard Centre or an internal tree at the Orchard Centre. It's just proving difficult to try and find some solutions around that, because obviously there's not a lot of natural space that we own. So there'll be some options for members to consider.
Any other comments on the tree? Councillor Russell.
I'm just wondering if the coffee shop would be pleased to have a notice that explains quite clearly why there isn't a tree there. Because I don't see that we should get any blame for that, because that is a ridiculous comment that they've made.
I agree. Councillor Strong.
Very much on the same point. It's clearly totally outside the town council's control. Maybe it's something that could be brought up in future with the JMC, with CBC, trying to bring some action so that even if it doesn't work this year, CBC can take action to adopt or otherwise before next year. Whilst it's in the hands of the developers, our hands are tied.
It's certainly very disappointing, isn't it? Okay. Any other members' questions, please? No further members' questions. Marvellous. We'll mark that off. There is no invited speaker, so then we move on to minutes of the Town Centre Management Meeting from Tuesday, the 17th of August. So we'll take that for accuracy first, one page at a time in the usual way. So it's page 4 in the pack. Any comments on page 4? Page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, 9, and finally page 10. Okay then, so is everyone happy to mark these minutes as accurate and true? Marvellous, thank you. So then we'll go through again, this time for matters arising. So starting with page 4, page 5. Lots of hands gone. Councillor Albo.
Yeah, thank you. On item 7B, the Union flag. Well, one of the points there, I asked about the height of the flagpole. I noticed that the flag is hanging it's not even limp, it's caught up in a bit of the building at the moment. So it is an issue, I think, the height of the flagpole. So has any progress been made with the flagpole?
Karim, can you do an update on this, please?
Yeah, thanks. So we will be providing a report to council on both the flagpole heights, the flag flying policy as well, which is being updated, and as well as that, looking at sort of the options around purchasing some other flags which we may require as well going forward. So that'll be coming shortly to us.
Thank you. Any other matters arising on page 5? No, everyone was going to ask the same question. Do we want to briefly touch on the community toilet scheme? Would you like to say a few words about that?
Yeah. So obviously there wasn't an intention this evening to circulate any form of report, but what I have taken the opportunity of doing is giving out some basic information on what the actual scheme entails, for members to give some consideration as to whether they would generally be in support of such an initiative.
Okay, thank you. Any comments on that? Councillor Pullinger.
Thank you. So I've read this briefly. What I would propose is to give us proper opportunity to consider it, that we do defer it to the next meeting. But what I would ask to facilitate that in particular is it does reference that there is the businesses and organisations are typically paid for the service. So some information about what the scale of that is likely to be would be helpful for us to be able to consider it.
Yeah, we'll make sure that goes onto the agenda for the next meeting, and we'll provide a report for you.
Okay, anything else on page 5? No. Page 6. Matters arising on page 7. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bond.
Item E, remedial works and water oil.
Oh, okay, page 6, yeah.
Obviously, I'm also quite asking the question about the Union flag. What happened to it on Sunday?
Okay, should we firstly do the update on?
Yeah, let's hold the other issue. We'll have a separate item to talk about the remembrance service, so we can cover that then.
Is that right?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So, Jonathan, would you do an update on the remedial works for the War Memorial, please?
Yeah, obviously the last meeting was a question for answer regarding the letter and cleaning of the War Memorial. Obviously, we can't do anything, as you're all aware, without having CBC permission from that. On the 24th, Peter arranged a Zoom meeting with CBC, Sam Colbeck and Sarah Morgan, who's taken over from him. She's due to take over almost immediately after the meeting, really. And we talked at length about re-lettering the War Memorial and the painting of the railings and posts at the site. These were broadly agreed in principle, but not officially, with Sam and Sarah for us to submit a bid to get the work done. After initial contact at the above meeting, I heard nothing back from Sarah, and on the 28th of the 9th, I explained to Sarah that we could not do any work without approval from them, and to complete the work on the 7th of the 10th, Sarah got back to me. She said that we'd go ahead with the painting of the railings, which is now complete, and submit a bid in principle for S106 application to cover the cost of refurbishment. But we would need to get, BTC would need to get 3 quotes for the work for the lettering to be done. So we've had a local firm's quote called Quincy's, that was from 2019, and that was 3732, including VAT. And today I received the last 2 quotes, one from Weldon Stone in Corby for 5383, including VAT.
Sorry, I think we shouldn't be talking about the numbers in a public meeting.
Sorry?
We shouldn't disclose the commercially sensitive value of those contracts in a public meeting.
Okay.
So we can talk about, we shouldn't mention the company names
Right,
or the numbers, please.
Sorry.
So can we please not minute that information?
Anyway, I've passed the quotes on to Sarah. That was today, and I'm waiting on her coming back to me. At least we've got the ball rolling. Hopefully, the S106, in principle, funding for that.
Right.
In principle, they have agreed to pay that. So,
Councillor Bond, did you want to come back on that?
I was just curious to see actually who owns the War Memorial and the fountain. Is it ours or does it belong to CBC?
I believe it belongs to CBC.
I don't think so.
Yes. I obviously I don't know that. So,
Councillor Strong.
If that's the question, because I was thinking that we would be entitled to do to the War Memorial and upgrade it regardless of CBC. I thought it would belong to the town. I'm sure the fountain does from when it was refurbished a good few years ago. So I don't see why we need CBC. I thought unless we're having funding. That's my observation. So perhaps we could just check that out when we're dealing with our asset register.
Makes sense. Councillor Albert?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the ownership, but the town council have refurbished the War Memorial in the past. So there may be some sort of documentation from that would help.
Okay, any closing remark on that, Mr. Clerk?
No, just other than to say that we'll check with our asset register to make sure that there's some clarity about ownership, and we'll fast forward the application for S106 monies. Thank you.
Okay. Any other matters arising on page 6? No. Page 7 then. No. Page 8. And page 9. And finally, page 10. Okay, no further matters arising. Thank you. That concludes the minutes. So items for consideration. So as I mentioned, I think the Remembrance Sunday service went extremely well. It was very well attended, but I think it's also useful to have an item here just to consider whether there are any changes or improvements we should record now to make sure that is fed into the planning for the 2022 event. So Councillor Bond, I think you'd already indicated you'd like to speak about the flag.
There were a couple, as we're raising it, there are also a few issues which I generally went really well. It looks good. I've already spoken to the town clerk actually after the remembrancing. I think it would be lovely actually if we considered an improved form of dress for our members of staff who actually were attending. It was very clear on the 11th at the Armistice Day. You know, we could have been better dressed. It would look better representing the town council. And of course the other thing on Sunday was about the malfunction of the Union flag. It went down, never came back up. As obviously that needs to be looked into. The other final item which I'd note, we didn't seem to have distributed sufficient numbers of programmes on a day. I'm sure there are other things, but I think that's the things which became very prominent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pullinger.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd firstly like to just say a big well done really to everyone who was involved in organising it. I think certainly the vast majority of people involved had not been involved in organising it previously. So I think overall it did go very well. I echo obviously the comments of Councillor Bond. The one thing that, and piece of feedback I've had from members of the public is, and from people who were watching the live stream because they couldn't actually attend in person, was around the positioning of the cameras, and particularly for the laying of the wreaths, that was very much blocked by a flag. So, but they really enjoyed being able to be involved in it, despite not being able to be physically there.
Okay, so I think we had Councillor Woodhead, followed by Councillor Fage, and then Councillor Strawn. Try this one.
I'll use it. Thank you. Just a few points actually. Partly echoing what other people have said. I also want to give my thanks to the BTC staff. I haven't had a chance to email people yet, but because I'm aware that all of the staff involved were completely brand new to this, so thank you again. And it's a big event and a big affair that we need to get right. So thanks again for everyone who got involved in that and came in early on Sunday. It was great to also see the coronets on top of the flagpole. We did get that right, which was great, and we now have 2 coronets on the flagpole rather than just 1, so that's great. And the cleats as well, to be able to tie the flags up, so that was nice to see some refurbishments there as well. I mean, following on from Ian's point about, Councillor Bond's point about the programmes, there was various discussions in the sort of planning meetings about how many we should have and all the rest of it. And what I'm unclear about, and maybe other people may know, is whether all of the programmes that we did print were distributed rather than actually not having enough, because I think there are 2 separate questions, because we did, I think 500-600 were printed. So I mean, if they were distributed and people still wanted them, fine, but I'm not aware if all of them were distributed or not. It was also placed on the website, so if people wanted to print it off at home, I don't know whether anybody did, they could, so at least they could see what's going on. Although I fully appreciate standing at Remembrance Sunday with your phone on a mobile device isn't great. So I accept the point about wanting a physical hard copy programme as well. It was great also to see a number of the voluntary organisations come to the town hall afterwards, in particular the new Deputy Lord Lieutenant and obviously Richard Fuller MP as well. So it's great to have them for the first time in 18 months, 2 years in the town hall, networking and all the rest of it. So that was really good. I've got kind of one proposal really, I think, from that, was that we probably ought to get some input from the voluntary and cadet and scouting organisations and so on as well, and whether we ought to have a sort of wash-up meeting with them in due course if they've got any particular feedback. It might be good, because I'm aware that people are in different literally different perspectives around the square and saw different things. I mean, there's things that I didn't see that other people did and so on. So in order to sort of catch everything and to maybe have a conversation about whether we need to perhaps change the how can I put it, the sort of not the layout, but the sort of grouping in the parade. So we've got those that can maybe march properly at the front and not holding everyone up and so on and so forth, and just having a rethink so everyone else can sort of amble behind if they need to, rather than being all chopped up. So yeah, that was really about it. But I get a proposal or an idea to have maybe a wash-up meeting involving the voluntary groups as well. But otherwise, I think pretty good all round, and I think I've had lots of positive feedback from people who are involved in the parade and also from members of the public as well.
Indeed. So thank you. Councillor Fage.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into the operational nitty gritty perhaps at another time, but something that perhaps our staff don't know who haven't attended before, but I've been coming to remembrance services as long as I can remember, and there'll be other councillors who have been coming much longer than I have. And I can't recall a time where we had a round of applause at the end of a Remembrance Sunday, right? And I think that goes to show how much this was needed in the town and how well received it was by our residents, because they didn't have to do that, but they did. And I think that was very fitting for the amount of effort and time that our staff put in alongside the Legion, and how much time Councillor Woodhead put into this as well. So perhaps if we could actually minute our thanks for the staff and to Councillor Woodhead and to the British Legion as well. And we obviously there's feedback, but we can in due course learn and get an even bigger round of applause next year, who knows.
Councillor Straw.
Thank you. I'd like to echo all those comments, but I was particularly pleased to see this year that there was a very positive police presence in terms of the road traffic control. 2 or 3 years ago, we were being told they wouldn't turn up and wouldn't be actually participating in that way. And I think those police should be congratulated on actually having done what I believe they should have been doing 2 or 3 years ago and doing it, I think, well. So it was overall very encouraging to see, so along with all the other assistance we got.
Thank you. Any other comments about Remembrance Service? No, I have 3 from the chair, if I may. So firstly, I think closing the High Street made it a much better event this year. So I hope that's something we can carry forward to future years. I think there was some confusion with the roll call, which wasn't on the lectern, and one of the participants had to race back to the council chamber to get it. So we need to make sure that doesn't happen again, maybe making sure everyone has it in their pockets. And then finally, so I did ask for feedback online, and one comment was around, wouldn't it be nice if the council streamed the event? Now, the council did stream the event, and I understand it was extremely well attended, more than 1,000 views, but maybe we should have promoted the fact that we were streaming it a little more widely, because perhaps everyone wasn't aware, but that was certainly well appreciated. So I think the comments then were the issues. Oh, Councillor Bond, did you want to say something?
That's what she said.
Okay, so I was just going to summarise what of the things I've noted. So there was the issue with the Union flag, the issue with the printing and distribution of the programmes, not quite enough. I think making sure we capture any input from the voluntary organisations that were involved. Sorry, Councillor Pullinger, could you remind me what you said? Sorry? Camera position, yes, and the camera position. I think those were the main things to note for next year, please.
Sorry, you just jogged my memory when you started talking about the roll call. Maybe I didn't hear it, but I don't seem to recall there was a distinction between those who from the First World War, the Second World War, and other things. It's just like they rolled in all into one. I think I didn't actually seem to hear that, and I think maybe I'm correct. No, exactly. It makes it, especially for youngsters, it puts it a lot more in context if you actually realise that these are separate events rather than just a whole list of names.
You're right. In previous years, the years were read out as well,
and the campaigns.
Okay, so we'd like to note that that's something that's preferable to restore.
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Albert.
On that, there was obviously some confusion about the roll call, but I'm pretty sure that some names were not called out. I think there were some pages missing.
Okay, that's worrying. Okay, thank you. Okay, before I move on, any final comments on that? Okay, so I think we have everything there. So moving on to item 9B then, this is an item on Biggleswade business support, just recognising it's a particularly challenging time for businesses at the moment in the town centre, and taking an opportunity to look at what the council might be able to do to help them. Who would like to go first? Councillor Fage.
Okay, well, I'll start off. So, look, I guess the purpose of this item is to think about what we can do between now and sort of the end of the financial year, bearing in mind we've got Christmas and then a typically tough trading time, not just for our town centre, but for all town centres, right? You know, nationally across the country. So I think this is a bit of a, not a brainstorming exercise, but you know, what can we do with the budget that we have and the budget items that we have, that maybe some of which haven't been touched quite as much because we were in lockdown for a large part of this financial year. What do we want to use that money for, and how can we channel it towards getting footfall in place? So you know, we've had a lot of feedback on the way the town centre looks, particularly how the market operates, and it's all been very positive, very, very positive. The look, the feel of it, the flowers this year were a huge success. The decluttering by and large makes the town centre much more inviting. Thought the war memorial at the weekend looked absolutely fabulous. But the challenge for us now as a town is, okay, we've got a town centre full of great businesses and a council which is doing absolutely playing its role in that. What can we now do to drive footfall? Because it's all well and good having it. How do we get people to come in and use it even more than they are? So look, I don't have any perfect answers, but there are multiple channels that I think we can probably think about, but one that has proven successful in the past is through social media and videos. We've trialed one for the market and it went well, but I think given the urgency about getting footfall into the town centre, which all town centres have, how can we channel some funding, potentially from the town centre events budget or otherwise, into some really good high quality videos that I know Councillor Knight, you helped put together the last one, and perhaps that's something we could lead on. So, you know, I'm open to how we do this, but if there's that possibility to have the backing of the committee to channel some of that funding, I think that would be worth a try. So, you know, I'd like to propose that for the market, we already have £100, which we can put behind it. But I think between now and April, we need to see if we can get that up to more like £100 per month. And similarly for perhaps a Christmas video, perhaps displaying the light display. We're putting all this money into a wonderful, wonderful light display. Shall we spend a couple of £100 on really promoting it to make sure we get people in? So, you know, I'm open to figures, but and it depends on how much money is in the budget. But if we could look to spend in the region of you know, high three figures, about £900 on some really, really good promotional videos, not just to reach Biggleswade, but to get Sandy, the villages, North Hertfordshire, maybe parts of Cambridgeshire, really bringing people in, then I think that would be to our betterment. But happy to hear what others have to say.
Okay, so we have a proposal, so I shall ask if there's a seconder before we move on. Not
it is, but I'm not quite sure.
Okay, I think Councillor. Okay, well, we can hold on. We can come back to that then. Councillor Strawn, I think you had your hand up first.
Thank you, Chairman. I've declared a non-pecuniary interest because I work in the town centre. But we do have a Biggleswade community engagement group. There are various business organisations in the town. There's the Chamber of Trade. There was also the group that organised the Sunday event, which was very successful. And there are a lot of other businesses. Rather than necessarily just throwing money at it, might I suggest that it would be appropriate to actually try and engage with these organisations and indeed businesses as a whole, possibly an informal meeting or something of that nature, to try and see if the businesses can work together. It's still very well us throwing money at it at the town council, but if the businesses don't want to partake, why should we throw the money at it? So I think it needs a two-way dialogue. So if that could be taken on board, I think that would be an appropriate way.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning that there is another Sunday on the Square event happening on the 5th of December, and town council staff and town council is using some of the welcome back funding to support that event.
And just on that very point, I found out at that last one that the people there didn't know there was a Chamber of Trade. I'm not sure whether the Chamber of Trade knew the event was going on as such, which was a rather shocking piece of information as far as I was concerned. Hence the suggestion of trying to get some of these groups together.
Councillor Pullinger.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm happy to essentially put a second Councillor Page's proposal. Sorry, I'm quite happy to second Councillor Page's proposal. I just wasn't clear on exactly what figures he was proposing, but in essence, I'm happy to second them.
I think it was a total of £900 in addition to the current £100.
Yeah, I think so. So it depends on how much is in that budget, but the way I see it is that that town centre events budget hasn't really been touched that much over the last year or so. So if it were to be, let's say, £500 for the market and up to £500 for other promotional videos, certainly one before Christmas, to the tune of about £100 per month per video, we could reach thousands of people very, very quickly. It doesn't get everybody because not everybody uses social media, but it's a quick and easy channel. And just to respond briefly to Councillor Strawn's point, I think he's right, but there is an urgency about footfall pre-Christmas, you know, there is a wider conversation to have over the next 6 or so months.
And I know this is an item later on the agenda. Perhaps the agenda is in the wrong order, so I'll take responsibility for that. But Wilma, could you briefly summarise whether there is £1,000 in the events budget that could be used in this way?
The simple answer is yes, depending on if the money is going to be tailored towards that alone. But before you agree to that, I think you need to take into consideration what Councillor Stratton said about engaging the other businesses. As you all know, I live outside this town. And in my town, the way we've engaged other businesses to increase footfall is to include the business on the high street. So I recommend, yes, you have the money to do that, but it would be nice for these businesses to have just simple raffles, like if you spend more than 10 or 20 pounds in a shop, you get something. Anything that can also be a contribution from them, so that it's not a one-sided affair like the council is putting all this money to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments? Councillor Pullinger.
Yeah, so just to continue. So yeah, I do second Councillor Page's proposal on that as £100 per month to support the advertising and the sponsorship of those videos on social media. The bit I'm not clear on is there an additional cost we also need to propose to actually create the content as well on top of that £100 per month? The other point I would make, just referring to Wilma's point, I absolutely think we should be working with businesses to do that sort of thing potentially in the future. I think they're probably slightly longer term, and I think that's definitely something for us to consider. But yeah, I think they're good ideas. And to Councillor Strawn's point, I think the intent, of course, is that these videos will be created with businesses in the town, showing people shopping in those businesses, for example, and so yeah, I think absolutely we ought to work with the businesses as well.
Okay, would anyone else like to comment on the proposal? Councillor Page?
Just to answer Councillor Pullinger's point, so I think this is not something, we are well aware that staff are very, very busy at the moment with particularly the Christmas event, but also supporting on the Sunday on the Square thing and multiple other competing priorities. So this is something that I think Councillor Knight and I could do together, but I would like to stress that we probably need a check at the very least to circulate any content or video among members and staff prior to going ahead with any sort of sponsorship. So that there is at least some assurances there that we're not just making nonsense videos or heaven forbid promoting councillors at the expense of the council, which is not the intention at all. So I know Councillor Knight did a very similar one for Christmas last year with the light show, which you may or may not have put some of your own personal finances behind on your own Facebook page, but to do it via the town council page or the market page, to do it properly and to have sign off from other councillors as well, I think would just give that extra assurance that money is being spent well to promote the town in a very professional way and in a new way that we haven't done before.
Yeah, so if I may comment from the chair, so certainly we've obviously invested quite a lot of time and some money on promoting the market. But as we approach this particularly difficult trading period for outside traders, it's already been noted and pointed out to me that footfall is not as high as it needs to be to retain some of the stalls that we have. We haven't done very much to support bricks and mortar businesses in the town, and it looks like at least a couple are really struggling. So anything we can do to grow the catchment area and bring people in from North Hertfordshire, West Cambridgeshire, other parts of Bedfordshire could potentially be positive. One last comment from Councillor Pullinger.
Yeah. So sorry, this is one thing I did forget to mention earlier, and that is how do we measure success, essentially? And we've talked on numerous occasions before about looking at what technologies might be available to measure footfall, or what surveys we might be able to do to measure footfall, whatever it may be. I think in order to be able to measure our success, we need to be able to measure our footfall as well.
In the ideal place, I think we'd have that capability first, but realistically, I don't think there's any means to deliver that this financial year. Mr. Clark, would you like to comment?
Yeah, okay. So our previous place shaping manager made an application to the High Streets Task Force back in April for funding. I don't believe that was successful. We haven't had any response actually, and we've done a search on that, and I know that Helen is also following that up. But when you go onto the High Street Task Force website, it's fairly clear that they will have had many thousands of applications, and they can't support everybody. So I think it's highly likely that that application was unsuccessful. So that particular piece of kind of IT solution, I think, is probably put aside. However, one of the other conversations yet to be had is perhaps the council should give some consideration at the right point in time to supporting the rollout of maybe perhaps free Wi-Fi as a possibility. So we need to look at a variety of options that might be able to give us some volumetrics around that. So perhaps it might be appropriate for officers to create some form of paper for members' consideration.
I think maybe one other thing to consider is whether we should place adverts in other local newspapers outside of Biggleswade, not the Biggleswade Chronicle, but maybe the North Herts Chronicle or whatever it may be called, as a way of really highlighting the benefits of Biggleswade, the free parking and the light shows and some of the other things that we have on. Okay, if there's no further discussion on that, shall I move to the vote then? So I think the proposal is to approve using £900 from the events budget between now and the end of the financial year to promote Biggleswade Town Centre and the businesses within it. I'm going to have a show of hands who's in favour of that then, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll vote for it as well. So that's 7, which I think is just about a majority. So that's carried. Thank you. That moves us on to item 9C, which is the draft job description and person specification for the place shaping manager, recognising we have a vacancy as a result of another member of staff leaving. And are there any comments on that job description? Councillor North.
Well, I just have one comment, and that is this: the statement within it that it is essential to have a university degree, which I would suggest is not really necessary and restricts the number of possible applicants. If that is put down as an essential, put it down as desirable, maybe, but not essential. That's my suggestion.
Indeed, a first degree. Councillor Strong.
Well, I wasn't going to raise that as the first point. I happily agree with Councillor North. I agree with read much the same thoughts. But first of all, we are having a hay review carried out at the moment. And in terms of that, is this specification premature in view of the hay review in terms of determination of what it is? Because the hay review might well make observations, I believe, possibly on spinal column points or degrees there. I'm not sure exactly what we're going to get from the hay review, but we are meant to be having one, and I'd anticipated that that would have been incorporated within this in part.
Would the clerk like to comment on that?
Yeah. Obviously, this is a draft job description. It's we're looking forward for members' contribution towards moulding the job description, and in particular, making sure that the purpose of the role is accurately defined. So to respond to members' concerns, this is a really interesting role, and actually it's quite difficult to try and place it sometimes. I think from an ideal perspective, it has two unusual traits to it. Number one is that when you look through the detail, there's a part responsibility for quite a lot of what you might call transactional related activity in the council. But at the same time, there's almost a counter logic to that we'd also be interested in an individual who has some strategic background, somebody who is good at strategic partnership working, somebody who has very sophisticated people skills, somebody who can meet with key partners and negotiate on our behalf. Finding somebody with those almost two extreme levels of skills is an interesting challenge, which is one of the reasons why Karim and I were looking at a first draft that said that somebody should have we're not talking about a 2.1 degree, we're talking about a first degree, somebody who has some capacity in that regard, who has the ability to think outside the box, but also can go along, and I won't give you too many examples, but can do some really quite transactional related activity that does not necessarily require that necessary skill base. Can I respond to Councillor Strawn's comments? I think what's very, very evident though, even on the previous conversation we've had, is how important it is to get the right person in this role, but to get the right person in as soon as we possibly can. We do not need to wait for the completion of the Hay review to inform us in regard to the job description. The job description will be offered at that point in time, and they will come back with some additional information in regard to where it might sit. What officers have done as a first instance is to come to a view, an indicative view about what we believe to be a level of remuneration that might attract the right level of candidate. And I wouldn't want to wait until January to look at a Hay recommendation. That can be complementary to what we've been doing in regard to the recruitment process. It's absolutely critical that we recruit to this post at the right point in time and get a very, very credible candidate that can make a massive difference to the community. There's great opportunities in regard to place shaping here, and I wouldn't want to curtail that.
Councillor Strawn and Councillor Fager, I think.
Just in response to the clerk's comments, I fully understand where he's coming from, and in fact, having a job description will help with the Hay review. I've just got reservations on possibly the salary range within it may not be appropriate after the Hay review's been done for some of the reasons that he's mentioned.
Yeah, need to be careful. Councillor Page.
Okay, so we've already had conversations this evening which explain why it's so important to get somebody into this role and who can do the job. So, I mean, it'd be easy to go through things line by line, but I don't think we need to do that. So, just a couple of relatively high-level comments. So, I think the first one is, for me, given the urgency and the discussion we've had around, say, footfall in the town centre, I feel this job description is maybe 70% place shaping, 30% town centre. And my personal view, and others may disagree, which is okay, but my personal view is I'd like to see that tipped slightly more towards the town centre. I'd like somebody spending a good amount of time being an absolute champion for Biggleswade, its businesses and market traders. But that's just my view. Others may disagree on that. There is a big place shaping role to do and important strategic conversations that we need this individual to take place or to take part in. I guess just just a second thought. So if it's possible to think about how long this is as a document, it is 4 pages for the job description. I think if there's a way of just condensing it slightly and removing some of the perhaps slightly more operational parts of the description, I think that would just make it a little bit punchier and perhaps a bit more attractive and catchier to some of the kind of people that we're trying to attract. And just some of the words that I've written down about this role is I think we probably need somebody who at some point is going to build up a really good knowledge of Biggleswade. So I'd love to see that come through. particularly sort of in the first part, which is about the overall purpose of the role, really getting a good knowledge of Biggleswade. But if we have somebody as well who is a self-starter and you know has either some events experience or publicity experience, I think that would make for a very strong candidate. But overall, I think it's going in the right direction, but just some reasonably high-level observations to take away from that.
Any other comments? Councillor Straw and then Councillor Wood.
Yeah, just an observation. I noticed the hours are full-time, 37 hours per week, but I think it should be specified that some weekend working will be required because with the market, that's inevitable, but it's not clear from this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Woodhead.
Thanks. Yeah, no, just firstly, no, it's great to see the JD and person spec coming to the committee. I know normally at this level of post, we perhaps wouldn't necessarily have so much input into it because of where it's sort of located, but it's a very welcome thing to have it on this particular role, especially as you know, there have been some challenges around this area in the past. I think I'm pleased to see that the salary range has changed slightly as well. I think that's I think a confidence from the council that we're wanting you know, very serious candidates in the future. And I think also just to reassure people, I think around the requirement on the degrees, I think Peter did allude to it, but I don't think he's saying first class degree. I think it's just first as opposed to masters or some other type of degree. So we're not specifying grade point averages, but also, I mean, Peter has put, so the town clerk's already put or equivalent, so they could have some sort of level 4 vocational qualification, which would be equivalent to a degree, which I would hope that we are constantly trying to strive to raise our skill level as a council as well. So I think that's a positive thing, but I'm not set on whether it's essential or desirable, but I just wanted to explain, I think, what I think the town clerk means by putting that in the description.
The clerk like to respond, then Councillor Bond.
Just partly to go in a slightly different direction, but just to give members some reassurance. I'm very happy that we've been successful in appointing some really strong quality candidates and to progress even further the kind of professional base of the council. And some of those candidates are around the table this evening, so it's great to see them in place. I think we should carry on with that, and this different approach to recruitment than we've used before, which kind of reaches out and tries to find a person who wouldn't necessarily naturally apply to Biggleswade Town Council, but we can try and almost encourage a different skill base that we wouldn't necessarily come across before. And that's been successful so far. So I'd be keen to try and trial that going forward as well. And I also would just say one final thing. I think there's I'm not a great lover of local government good practice. I think it's a kind of a falsehood, but there's definitely some really interesting stuff taking place in local towns to Biggleswade, where some very competent place shaping people have made a massive difference to their councils. And I'd love to try and replicate that for Biggleswade.
Councillor Pond.
It's an interesting specification, but it depends what we're after. A place shaping is a good question to ask around this table who actually knows what place shaping is or actually could define it. I think some of us would struggle on this. But when we're looking at Biggleswade, we're trying to have projects that are going to enhance Biggleswade, to actually not just keep it as it is, but to actually look for the future and actually how we can make a success of it. And if you take an organisation like Central Bed, you'd have more than one person working on it. And as Town Clerk was saying, it's part of you're trying to get people together who are part of a team. But actually you need, the person for this job has to be fairly good to work as a team and to drive those sorts of projects. I think I would disagree actually with Councillor Farage about the town centre part of it. The place shaping is a big job in its own role, and it needs to be a very good candidate. It needs to be part of a team for us to make look at Biggleswade. We've managed to get the HIF funding and so on. These are things we need somebody to be really good to be able to pursue what we need as a town. It's a difficult job. I mean, some of this is a little bit wishy-washy as far as specification is concerned. But the fact is, I think we really want to try and get a very good, intelligent candidate who's actually capable of doing grant applications, but also sees it in a much bigger role. I'm not the right person to specify this, but I can see this is a very big role in its own right.
I think it's a crucial role, which is why I think it was important it came to this committee. If I was to make a comment from the chair, if I look at the overall purpose section of the job description, I think perhaps that should be the most important part of the job description. And for me at the moment, it describes the work rather than the outcomes that we're looking for. And I think it would be slightly better if it was couched in terms of, creating a vibrant, busy town with a strong sense of community, talking about footfall, talking about business premises occupancy and things like that, rather than necessarily talking so much about being an active member of the management team. What is it we're trying to get the successful candidate to achieve? And I think that would be a way of really bringing focus to the role. Any other comments on the job description? Would anyone like to propose a way forward? Councillor Fage.
Yeah, so I think all valid comments, and the town clerk and others will have heard what we all have to say, albeit slightly different points of view, but that's okay. I guess I'm just curious about timelines now, because it'd be good to press ahead as and when we're ready to do so. But perhaps just as a check, I guess running this when it is ready, if there is some further iterations to be made, perhaps past chairman of personnel and the chairman of this committee, just to give the final nod to say that from a personnel perspective, happy, from this committee's perspective, happy, because this is the person who's going to be carrying out quite a lot of the decisions that we make.
Any other comments? Okay, so we have a proposal. Would anyone like to second that? Councillor Pullinger?
Yeah. So yeah, I'll second that. And I, like Councillor Fage, I agree with many of the comments and valid comments. I think it really is important that we are clear on what the purpose is and what the outcomes we want to deliver, and specifically how they will tie into our corporate plans and such like. So, but yeah, I completely agree with the proposal that there is a little bit more work to do, and it should then be signed off by yourself and the chair of personnel before it's implemented.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to a show of hands in favour of that proposal then. That looks like just nearly a majority. Okay, thank you. Carried. Right, where are we on the agenda next? So we move on to items of information. So Karim, over to you, please, I think, to give us an update on the planning for the Christmas offer.
Yeah, thank you. So for the 26th of November Christmas light switch on event, we're in a pretty good place. We have now 26 stalls, which comprise a whole range of offerings from food, drink, alcohol, seasonal gifts, and a fun fair as well. We've done a printed schematic of the entire event with the stall holders, and which we're sharing that with them as we speak. We've already conducted an event risk assessment. The road closure requests have been done. All the health and safety things have been carried out and shared with the CBC SAG group, which has been quite a high administrative burden, but we've done that because there's been quite a few extra things they've put our way in terms of policies. We've now got a larger stage, which will be coming 7.5 metres by 7.5 metres, which we put that in place for delivering an enhanced health and safety and experience, and also greater visibility for the performers on stage. The light switch on the events themselves, there's going to be 8 of them held on Fridays and Saturdays going up to the 24th of December. And we've prepared the whole program listing leaflets, posters and promotional materials which have been printed, and they're available put on our website and social media. The Santa's Grottos will be taking place on the 4th, 11th and 18th of December. That's it for now, I think.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clark.
Can I ask a question of you, Karim? I know the answer, but I'd like you to just articulate it a bit more, if you don't mind. I think there's a quite a big responsibility now in regard to the SAG requirements. Yes, in the sense of the sheer number of policies that the council needs to develop, and that you and other colleagues have managed to develop quite quickly. And I don't think members are fully aware, literally, of the time commitment associated with that now, and the prerequisite from central beds. Could you just articulate that a bit more, please?
Sure. So there has been an increased burden, if you like, placed on us of things including health and safety, COVID-19, as you'd expect, pandemic policy, protocol, I should say, lost child policy, vulnerable persons policy, anti-terrorism policy, crowd management policy, and other such, the like, which it would appear some of those we didn't have in the past, but we've now built them up and we do have them. So we've been sharing those and engaging with CBC.
So thank you for your work on this, and to everyone who's been involved. I know it's been a lot of work, and it's probably work that some of the people doing it didn't necessarily expect to be doing it a few months ago. Of course, it's a week on Friday, the light switch on event, so we have to hope the weather's nice. Councillor Pullinger.
Yeah, so my question's around the grotto, and how are the bookings going for that? Is it sold out yet, or are there lots of spaces available?
My understanding is that it's going quite well. As my discussions with Karen, who's been assisting on this, that's what I can say. They're going quite well. It's quite healthy.
Yeah. So the reason for me asking was, I know last year it sold out very early, and whether any consideration might be given to whether we want to put it on a Tuesday market if it does sell out quite early.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Thank you. We'll consider that for sure.
Thank you. Yeah. Councillor Albo.
I'm pleased to hear that we've got all these policies in place now. I just wanted to ask about crowd safety, I guess, and you mentioned road closure as well. So can I ask what is the road closure order? Which roads will be closed? Because this will be the first Christmas event when the railings are not there. Yeah. So that is a concern of mine.
Thank you. So we'll be closing Station Road up to Back Street, which is about 25 metres to 30 metres. So that area there will be closed off. Yeah.
So and that will include up to the junction with High Street.
Yeah, so that's primarily recognising the fairground rides are going to be in front of the White Hart, and in previous years there's been a lot of traffic crossing that section of Station Road, which was considered a hazard. Councillor Strawn.
Well, it's just very much the concern that's been expressed in the past is the people just crossing Station Road, not necessarily on the zebra crossing and the vehicles and pedestrians colliding, which they haven't done so far, but it certainly was a concern for anybody who's organising the safety there.
So that closure should hopefully improve. Is that closure all day or just the peak time? I think it's just the peak time, isn't it? Yeah. So from sort of 4 o'clock onwards or something. Okay, Councillor Fage.
Just to stress for colleagues who aren't aware, so we do have one good addition this year. It should be a good addition. So mindful that in most years the switch on is at 7 o'clock, and then from sort of 20 past people start to peter out ever so slightly. The footfall is still very high and they go into shops and things, which is great. But this year Simon Baker and his Scar band will be on the stage from 10 past 7 till 8 o'clock, which is a new addition. And the stage this year will be an actual stage, which I think accommodates 50 something children and me, because unfortunately the mayor can't make it. So it'll be a good old look tool for the first time in a while, alongside the school kids. But I think there's a few things which we're going to try this year, which having not been able to do last year, fingers crossed it should be bigger and better than it has been before, but watch this space.
Thank you. Councillor Woodhead.
So just a couple of points really. First thing, on the Santa's Grotto thing, it worked really well last year, so hopefully there'll be some good pickup this year. I know certainly a lot of the Santa events locally book up quite early on, so hopefully we'll be able to plug that gap. So fingers crossed that will work quite well. And the other point I had was, is there going to be a sort of programme on the night or online as what time everything's happening? Because obviously on the poster, which I promoted on my Facebook page and others have as well, it doesn't actually say obviously what time things are happening. And it's just so, I mean, maybe we can do an iteration of that nearer the time, but people will be saying, when's the light switch on? When's Simon Baker or whatever? And it just so we can hold people in the square a bit longer or come at the right time, like after school and for the kids and things like that, just so people know what's happening, that's all.
Karim, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, we are. We've pulled together a programme we'll be distributing that very soon.
And I think the plan is to have around 750 copies of that programme printed.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments on the Christmas plans? Okay, so just one thing I would add, so it has been a little bit challenging getting all of the usual participation, particularly with some of the COVID restrictions that have been imposed on some of the local organisations and schools where maybe their choirs aren't able to practice in the usual way. So we do have a couple of gaps in the programme. So if anyone is aware of any singers or musicians or talent who would like to have an opportunity on the stage, then please ask them to contact the office, and there may be an opportunity for at least one 20-30 minute slot. And of course, there's always a risk that talent could be forced to pull out at the end or at the last minute should they test positive for COVID. We've already seen some of that happening. So would welcome any suggestions for potential performers. Okay, moving on then to item 10B, Town Centre Finances. So this is a bit of a compromise doing this as an oral update, but I think it's important that we understand what we have left as we start to approach the end of the year with just one more TCM meeting, both around the Welcome Back funding that we were successful in getting. I'm not quite sure when that runs out, when it expires. So making sure that we don't miss the opportunity to use that funding in a responsible way, but also the events budget, recognising it's an extraordinary year, and we've just agreed to use £900 of that to help promote businesses in the town. But it'd be great if Wilma, perhaps you could give us an update on where we stand with those finances, please.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of the Welcome Back Fund, we've spent so far, we've committed 29. Thank you. In terms of the Welcome Back Fund, we've committed 29K of that as expenditure, and we've got about 3K left. Our spending officer, Sarah Morgan, is very friendly and very, she's worked very well with us. So she's happy for us to bring anything to the table, and she'll mark it against the criteria and let us know. Included in that 29K, what she has done, which I think the credit goes to Kareem, is she's diverted some of that fund to help us in the town centre management fund. So we're getting some street, the 10K expenditure that we've already incurred for our town centre management. She's happy to divert that to be paid via the Welcome Back Fund. That is why we have the surplus left in the town centre management of 11K. If she wasn't doing that, we would have a surplus of only 2K left. So that's very good of her, and it's good that we're working together. The only thing is she's just advised me today that any expenditures we incur, we need to do it via her. So invoices will need to go to CBC instead of us. So we're trying to follow that protocol so that we don't miss out on that fund. Coming back to the town centre management fund, we indeed have spent for the year. We've spent so far, we spent 20K already for this year. We've committed 20K, and then we are left with, if we're able to get that money back from CBC as soon as we can for the lights they're paying for via the Welcome Back Fund, we're left with just under 12K, which is 11.9K. In that town centre management fund is our big topic, CCTV, which is going to be covered later on in the program. So I don't want to talk about it now. So I've also taken that CCTV cost out so that we are not thinking we've got money in there that doesn't belong to us. So the summary of it all is we've got 11K, and we've committed 900 already this evening. So we had 11.9, we've committed 900 to your project. So we have only 11K left to spend from now till March. Hopefully we will make some savings out of it if we can.
Thank you. And it's important to note we've actually taken delivery of the gazebos that were funded by the Welcome Back funding as well now, which some of you may have seen in the town, which look fantastic. Councillor Pullinger.
Yeah, thank you. Just some general observations in terms of the finances around the town centre. So from the figures you've talked about, and I know there were a couple of emails going around earlier today as well, it seems essentially the whole town centre budget has been considered as one pot, not against the individual budget headings that have been put in place at the beginning of the year. I think with the position we're in, that's probably manageable for the rest of this year with what we're looking to do. But I think we need to be really clear as part of delivering the finance review what their process is going to be for variance between those different budget headings in the future, and how that gets managed, and who approves moving money from one place to another or combining pots together to manage them in the future. It sounds like we have got enough funds to do things like Councillor Fage has proposed earlier, and to make sure any events we have between now and the end of the financial year are able to be covered. But if we've got an amount set for events, we shouldn't be using it for, I think, grass cutting, which is one of the things that's on there, when that's not what it was originally allocated for.
Did you want to come back, Wilma?
In terms of the summary I've given you, I've just given you the summary for the cost center as a whole. What I haven't given you is the line by line. And if I'm going by line, the 11K that we have left is for the town center events, as I didn't explain earlier on in my email. But when we come to line by line, that's not what I've given you. What I give you is the general funds position of the town center management fund. So there will be line by line analysis, which we'll give to you when we have the October accounts in front of you. And that will tell you what each line has been used for. And that is where you see who's overspent or who's underspent. But as a cost center as a whole, they have 11.9 in the pot as we speak. But if you look at individual vote heads, you see that, okay, grass cutting, which was not even part of the budget at all, is an overspend on that budget. Thank you.
Can I make an observation? Yeah. Is that all right? Okay. I think so. One of the things that I need to make sure that I do before the start of the new financial year is to have the right conversations with Central Beds about the responsibilities for instance, the grass cutting going forward. I'd like to think that we can reach a compromise. So I won't go into that at this specific time. And as Wilma said, at the moment, we're seeing things as an overall perspective. There's been no journal transfers, there's been no environments. We're just seeing it as a whole package of money in this particular year. And of course, when we provide information for members and when we're more sophisticated about the reports that you receive, you can see individual line information at the same time. So we're just trying to be sensible at the current state of play.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for Wilma, please, on the budget? No, then we'll move on. Thank you very much. That concludes that item. So finally, then, I believe that takes us to item C, which is an update from Karim on CCTV. And may I just ask that we avoid talking about anything that's commercially sensitive, please. I'll try and get that out there first on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, sure. We've had a quote in from a supplier. I sent around that earlier today. Essentially the proposal which has come in looks to upgrade our existing analog connection to a fiber connection potentially. It looks at upgrading the cameras that we currently have, and essentially we will be putting this into a report for the next council meeting to consider incorporating some of these proposals along with the best options going forward, what those could be, which may include looking to section 106 town centre improvement funding for those. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, any questions on that? Councillor Pullinger, followed by Councillor North.
Just want to clarify one thing in terms of that report that will come forward, that it will include the proposals from both suppliers that we're aware of, because although I think it's quite reasonable in the circumstances to not go to 3 quotes because there is a very specialised service, there are obviously 2 providers that we ought to properly consider.
Yes, that's right. We will.
Just a small point connected to what Karim has just been mentioning. I mean, this is a complicated beast actually, and I'm grateful that Karim is leading on this rather than me. But there's one of the other challenges that we need to overcome is that some of the opportunities here will create what I would call midterm growth. That's the accountant in me. So we need to think of creative opportunities about how we might absorb that for the betterment and making sure that we've got as many of the right cameras in place with the right tech that gives us the security and intelligence, looking at Councillor Strawn and a connection to the police, that will help the broader community at the same time. But there are some financial challenges that we need to overcome, and that will be picked up in Karim's report.
If I may just add a little bit more colour. So my understanding is, you will remember we discussed this before at council, and there was a deadline by which the current service we needed to make a decision around migrating the current service. It looks like Central Beds have had some delays associated with the provision of their new service. And it looks like we will need to make a decision before they take a decision, which I believe will be in the new year, around exactly which path we follow. There will be financial implications with either route, but certainly a number of members of the crime working group met with one of the suppliers last week, and we had a very useful meeting, I think, really understanding the benefits and the detail of that proposal, but we clearly need to look into the counterparts. Councillor Strawn. Oh, sorry, Councillor North first. Yeah.
I would just like to say that I don't think we should even consider using Chinese sourced equipment for a purpose like this. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Strawn.
Just to follow up on your points, Chairman, this is actually a lot more complex than one would actually anticipate, and from a straight contractual point of view, there are lots of little ramifications. So that'll come out, I think, I'm sure, in the report in full council, which will deal with not only the figures, but the practical issues and operational issues, if I can put it in those terms, of what's available.
Yeah, okay, thank you. If I may comment on Councillor North's point, I understand your concerns regarding the origin and potential security of cameras. Could I suggest that we should consider all options, but clearly the cybersecurity challenges associated with overseas suppliers should be considered, as opposed to not considered?
No, well, I don't agree with you. I think it's obvious and clear that we should not be using Chinese equipment for closed circuit TV in the town centre.
Can I encourage any other comments on this? Because I know there are significant cost differences between different suppliers. So it's not an easy decision. I think Councillor Page had his hand up first, followed by Councillor.
Yeah, let's just consider the two options when they're laid out to us. There'll be some benefits of one, there'll be some costs of one, and members can cast their votes accordingly, and we'll have that debate then. But I think it's an ill-informed conversation at this point. Just one thing it's not ill-informed. Some have the information, but we don't all yet have everything to weigh up. But we'll do so in due course. I think just one thing to remember is that this is, if I'm not mistaken, not actually a statutory obligation of this council. It's something that we go above and beyond to do for our town centre, and it's something that, when I saw the setup with our current provider, is something that is done very well and very effectively. And there are multiple, there are a number of incidences in the last year or so that I recall being reported in our town centre that we know the current supplier have managed to deal with the police. So it's clear that whatever we currently have is working well. So at the very least, we know that we're coming into this discussion, an important discussion, from a position of strength, doing the right thing by our town centre. Not something we have to do, but something that we do because it's the right thing to do, and it's something we do well.
Thank you. Councillor Pullinger.
Yeah, so just coming back on Councillor North's point, I think, as you said, Chair, that we should consider all options. But yes, absolutely need to take account of any cybersecurity concerns. I think the concerns around this specific technology is probably less than other things like 5G technology, where there is certainly a very significant risk. But in terms of actual CCTV cameras, I think that the risk is really relatively low, and a lot of other public authorities do use cameras from the specific Chinese supplier that is involved in these quotations, and I don't think there's necessarily a significant risk there, as long as we identify what cybersecurity risks may exist and make sure any mitigations that are required are there in place.
Certainly something to consider. Thank you. Any other comments on CCTV? Councillor Russell.
Simply to say that I don't think it's a case just of security. It's a moral case of whether we buy from China at the moment or not. I think it's a much wider issue, because if everybody always goes for the cheapest, it'll come from places like China, where people aren't paid a proper wage, blah, 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 as well as any possibilities of security. So I have no idea what the figures are. And if the figures are so dramatically different that we couldn't possibly afford the other alternative, then we may have to swallow hard. But I think there are issues other than cybersecurity in there.
Thank you. Certainly, I'm sure officers have heard that there's deep concern around the origin of equipment, and that's something that we need to weigh up very carefully, I think. Okay, any final comments on CCTV? No, thank you. Okay, that's the last item on the agenda. So public open session. There are no members of the public. There are no exempt items. Unfortunately, there is no gavel, but I therefore declare the meeting closed. Thank you.